Hi there. This is Jonathan speaking,
Hi, Jonathan.
and that is Felicity who just said hi. We decided to meet today because I put a post on Facebook which Felicity kindly responded to, and we agreed to have a discussion about it. And we thought we'd record it.
hmm
So there'll be a title to this video which will give you some clue of what it's about, but I'm just going to sort of launch into a bit about my background, which kind of will give you some idea of my road to writing such a post. Um, I,
Yes. hmm
I come from a family of four children. That's three boys. I'm the middle boy, and a girl. She's the youngest out of us. And our mother, she remembers being sexually abused as a young girl by, I believe it was a friend of the family, is my recollection. It was someone known to her anyway. And this uh, uh, obviously this experience colored a lot of her life, as is still coloring a lot of her life. And it kind of came out most interestingly in such things as around the family dinner table, expressions such as "all men are potential rapists," and you can imagine how that went in a family of like three teenage boys just trying to
Whoa.
discover their sexual identity, and a
Mm.
younger sister, and this vitriol from this like pain from inside our mother coming out like this. So
Yeah.
when I was a child, I was introduced to hardcore porn at the age of about 11, which was, just innocently we were playing in some prefabs. These are old prefabricated homes built in emergency after the war. So we were playing in some local prefabs near our house and discovered these magazines. And ever since then, for the majority of my adult life, I had like this unhealthy fascination with such things. And I almost instantly, when I experienced it the first time, I could almost feel this kind of like cold claw taking hold of me. And it was like it was an instant fascination and like attraction, but also a repulsion at the same time. And so that sort of claw had a hold on me way past my 30th year, which is when I, swore adamantly to myself that I was going to get that all behind me. So it was a very powerful thing. And so when I was young, I remember, I mean, once my mother found me in bed with a pornographic magazine. That was an extremely disturbing experience in my life. Do you know what I mean? Because the shame involved in that, and so it started for me. I can't continue to speak so much about my mother. I can say how what I've seen in her and how this kind of thing, this draw. Maybe if I sort of put a tent over us of kind of like the power of sexuality, uh, 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 um, and the power it can have over us and the troubles it can cause. Um, and I think that's kind of important that we have in their sexuality and power, because especially the experience, like in terms of my mother's relationship with her abuser, was a distinct position of power because she was young innocent and he was a trusted adult, and so he had all the power, and he sort of drew her into this field of sexuality without her having any power or consciousness within it, and thereby created a huge trauma in her life. And then I had the same thing, and it happened in a different way, but nevertheless there was women there putting themselves out there, putting their image out there, saying, Jonathan, you want this, and we want you to want this because I'm getting paid for it, or I'm not getting paid for it, but I just want to advertise myself in this way, etc. And so it disturbed me, and it's had a huge effect on my life. for a long time as well. And so, and you know, there was a power inequality there. And I'm not going to sort of, it's not the same for me as the situation with my mother, in that with my mother, it was two present individuals. Although with my mother, she was a child, so her individuality had not had a chance to form strongly enough. And with me, I was a child too, but there was a definite that you know there was a presence more just of this kind of beguiling and elemental potent power of sex being presented to me through other people, particularly women, because I wasn't interested in the men in these images. Um, uh, who had put that themselves in that position to put that image to me. So, you know, they were kind of abusing me by proxy, if you like, through the medium. Um, and 'cause I hadn't asked for this, do you know what I mean? And okay, it wasn't their fault that I found it in some undergrowth when I was 11 years old. Nevertheless, these were available in my local magazine shop. So, you know, I could go in and I would look down there for 2000 AD or the Beano. And all I had to do was accidentally look up, and although that it might have been partly censored, it was still thrust in my face. Do you know what I mean? And this kind of vibration of something unknown and strong was felt. And then of course we'll get more into the discussion really about, you know, how this is used in media and so forth, which is not just, you know, casually by women on the street. And so my issue with this is about women using this power. And Felicity, I don't know what her relationship with this issue is, but for example, I've seen already that a woman has responded to my post, and she said this is about power. And so from her side, it will be more, I guess, about male power. For me, it's more about female power. That's my kind of issue with this thing, and then my power as a male in relation to that. Um, and so what I want to really say more about my sort of history is so yeah, as a child I remember I used to like lie in bed and I'd be praying for my family and the neighbors and the whole world and all this, and then I'd at the end I'd say, and dear God, please do not make me a rapist because because you know I'd already knew that I'd been infected by something. And I remember there was a popular television series and there was this female policewoman in it. And in one of the programs, she was like, there was like, you know, they caught a rapist or something like that. And they went and searched his home. And she pulled out these pornographic magazines from under his bed. It's like, this is the beginning that made you a rapist. And so, you know, there's that. And then there's my mother at the dinner table reminding me or telling me every man is a potential rapist. And so I had that as a bit of a mantra in my teenage years. Dear God, please do not make me a rapist, because you know, society was telling me, on the one, it was giving me this mixed message. On the one hand, it was saying these kind of things will make you a rapist, and you are a man, so you are potentially a rapist, and you have power over women that they are vulnerable to and have no defense against. Therefore, it's all your onus, it's all your fault and your problem that you have to control, because you are the abuser and the women are the abused. And I didn't want to be in that situation, you know, I didn't want to be that. And to and then I grew up and I was quite innocent in the terms of sex, apart from that, because that was, you know, just an individual private thing. I had no idea how, like, I remember at the age of about 12 or 13, there was a party from my uh, my school, and I was invited, and there's all everyone else was kind of like dancing in couples, and I didn't understand what was going on because this was a world alien to me. And then there's one part where they shut couples individually in the bathroom together, and so I was shut in the bathroom with a young a friend from my class, and she tried to snog me, to kiss me. And snog is not just a kiss; it's like, mouth to mouth, long drawn out thing. And so I sort of obliged, but that was my first experience of sexuality in relation to another real human being rather than a virtual obsession, which was felt by me to be quite a different thing entirely. And so I was quite naive in terms of sexual relations that way, and it took me a very long time to kind of actually have a girlfriend, because I was not streetwise or in any of those terms, and I wasn't looking for that kind of thing. And when I did, my experience really, one thing that was very interesting, because of my mother's influence growing up, I was more of a feminist than any woman I ever dated, or had a long term was my long term girlfriend. And so I've read feminist, militant as well, feminist authors. I can't remember names now because this was a long time ago. And I've been to like feminist things, and I kind of held that banner for quite a long time. And as I sort of grew and matured, and I discovered in many of my relationships, women would only use me for sex, and if I didn't provide sex quickly or sufficiently, or in a manner that was desired, I was very quickly dumped. And 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 uh, so that was an experience. And then maybe just the last thing I could say in terms of all this is that within all this, I want to introduce this whole thing that I always found that I would love. I was looking for a love relationship with a woman, and whenever sex entered into it, either from arising in me, that desire arising in me, or from their side, it always ended up ruining it, at least to a certain degree. So the relationship became more kind of bodily and about pressing ourselves together, which is a wonderful thing, and it can be a lovely experience, but it tended to kind of overlay and obscure the love bit, and it always seemed to sort of almost shatter a beautiful, purely loving relationship, and bring it maybe down to earth. Do you know what I mean? But I never understood why we couldn't just have a relationship which didn't have to be on earth. Do you know what I mean? We could be human beings on earth, but our relationship could be unsullied by all of that. And obviously, if you want children, and it took me a long time to find a wonderful person whom I could have a child with, um, because of what I expressed before, that those various factors, and so here we are today, and I made this post, and Felicity read it, and now we're going to have a discussion.
Thanks, Jonathan. That was really good timing because I've had the garbage trucks roll down my street, and it
Okay,
was extremely noisy until this point. It's just rolling down the hill now.
but maybe they can help us
Yeah,
bring some of this garbage out and recycle it into something new and
that's what I thought. I
better.
thought it's quite a good metaphor, really.
Yeah.
So now that at least the background noise is the Glasstonian birds
Oh,
chir
fantastic.
chirping and singing.
Oh, that is
They're quite
wonderful.
loud.
I miss Glastonbury.
Yeah.
How's the old Vale and Hill of Avalon today? It looks
Oh,
beautiful.
it's great. It's great. I later I'll turn the camera around so you can see. Actually, I'll do it now. You can see I'm looking out.
Well, that would be fantastic, because we have there the Hill of Avalon is a very potent fertility symbol,
Yeah,
feminine.
that's right.
And there's
Yeah.
a tower nicely plonked on it by some beneficent Christians, which is quite an interesting phallic symbol.
Yeah, the tour, that's right. You could put that as the head the page,
That would be a good idea.
your
Yeah,
video cover.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean you with you sharing, I'll share my story because it's a great juxtaposition.
Cool.
Um, really, really, and when viewers listen to our two stories juxtaposed,
Uh-huh.
then some interesting things will come up, I think, in their
Excellent.
reflections.
Excellent.
Um, and yeah, I think it's very much like you're asking what title. Yeah, it's so much to do with how sex is viewed, how it's actually used to manipulate people, men and women, sex, power, and manipulation.
Yeah.
Because you're a dad, I'm a mom. So raising children in these fallen times, I consider these times as very fallen. And I was in for some massive shocks when my
Would you just
girls
like to
reached.
say just one moment to extrapolate a little bit what you mean by fallen, particularly in
Um,
reference to what we're talking about, perhaps?
yeah, in reference to, where children are not, well, let's say at school and amongst their peers, love is not spoken of. Children are not taught how to relate to each other and how to grow
The old
into loving
traditional, yeah, the
relationships.
old traditional families and cultures
Yeah,
have died out, and we're in
yeah,
this kind of fraught space now where
yeah.
everything seems to go and there's not much protection.
Oh, and quite the opposite to protection. It's actually they are bombarded. They are,
Exactly. Exactly.
especially with girls. I don't know about boys, but raising two girls by the time they were going to secondary school. So they're 12, 13. I look around, the other girls of their age, this whole business of adultification,
Or
turning,
sexualization,
yeah,
in other terms.
at a younger and younger age, that's been
Mm.
incredibly distressing for me
Yeah.
over the last 10 years,
Isn't it weird that it's termed adultification, but in many respects it is sexualization.
It is,
That's it,
yeah.
you know,
Let's not minimalize it. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's not really much to do with becoming an adult,
not
but
just
becoming a
no.
commodity. Yeah, because it
Wow.
sells. It
Exactly.
sells magazines, it sells films,
It has
everything.
value and power that of its own that we subconsciously want at least, even if not consciously.
Yeah, so it's a big topic. That's why I sort of wanted to discuss it with you because it's been something I've questioned, you know, to some degree, like yourself, all my life, but also having to guide my own daughters through their teen years. They're now 20 and 21. They both got solid, stable partners, but protecting them from that onslaught um, was really tough, really hard. Because I grew up in a different culture and I grew up in the 1960s and 70s because
Hmm.
so I grew up in Malaysia
Hmm.
and didn't enter Western society as such. I mean, Malaysia
Uh-huh.
being a British colony was partly westernized, but the traditional family values were all there.
Okay.
Um, uh, I was 14 and a half when we emigrated to Australia, and that was a huge culture shock because then I saw how Aussie teenagers behave,
I can
boys and
imagine.
girls.
I've been to New Zealand for about a month. I can imagine how there's a lot of machoism in New Zealand.
Yeah, yeah, hugely in Australia, and yeah, the children just run havoc in school. They were chasing the teachers around with rulers, and there was
Oh my
no
God.
discipline. It was and
Yeah, we've
that's what I
lost it.
saw.
We've lost it in the West. Seriously.
And the British comps here that my girls went to for a year or so, it's a similar thing. I thought, oh my goodness, I'm like reliving my teenage years in Australia.
Good Lord.
Anarchy. It's not education, it's anarchy.
Insane. It's insane. Fallen times. So continue,
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah. So I grew up in an extended family, not particularly religious, but my grandfather was Catholic. My mum went to a Methodist convent, so she was a Methodist at that time. And her mum, my granny, went to the Chinese temples to pray. So I had, and Malaysia is so completely eclectic.
Wow.
Um, but
Fantastic.
traditional family values, I never questioned it. I never questioned things about respecting the elders. It's still very much in me. Somehow I grew up with that. And I went to a convent school as well, run by British nuns. So
Were they
very strict,
strict? Right.
very strict. The cane was used.
My elder brother was the last boy in our school to they used the cane on. So I
Oh, wow.
missed it. I missed it.
Lucky you. Yeah. So, growing up in an Asian post-colonial
Oh,
Asia like that was,
Felicity, I'm so
yeah.
sorry because I'm not rich. I only have a free Zoom, so this recording will end in 10 minutes. So we finish your story in 10 minutes if you can, and then we'll do a
Yeah.
part two of discussion after.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So briefly, because I was brought up, also Malaysia was a Muslim country, still is a Muslim country, moderate Muslim. So when I read your post, I thought, yeah, I'm going to throw in some of the cross-cultural reflections, because this issue of women um, you turning themselves into sex objects is so different and so it's extreme, okay? Because in the Middle East, and you've just come back from the Middle East, they're completely covered up, aren't they?
Mhm.
In
Well,
Malaysia,
some
it's
of
not
them,
like
yeah.
that, but more and more so. You
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
in Malaysia, I observed in my time, which is 60s,
Mhm.
70s, even
Mhm.
into the 80s, they wore beautiful clothes that were
Mhm.
modestly covered their shoulders, their
Mhm.
legs. And
Mhm.
then from that to Australia, where, well, people hardly wear any clothing.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's so hot. I gotta expose myself to the
I
sun.
know, like bikini culture,
Yeah,
and also like, look at my body is very,
exactly. Yeah.
it's body conscious Australia.
Mm.
So all those culture shocks, I guess, informed my view of who I who I was as a developing
Mm.
child into a young woman.
Mm.
Um, and then, like, to juxtapose, the first 10 years of me being a young woman, say from age 20 to 30, I felt like I was being subject to predators. The men that turned up in my life, it was like all they wanted was, sex. And I
Mm.
felt like a
Mm.
piece of meat.
Mm.
Again, is
Mm.
it because I was Asian in a predominantly Caucasian society? And
Mm.
I don't know, but some of my boyfriends, it never could go much further because they, I don't think they had the values of, oh yeah, they didn't want children. They didn't particularly want to have a very long-term relationship. And then that was just quite moderate. But I had experiences in my early 20s where I was literally like dragged, almost raped. Um,
What was that? Maybe we can talk about that experience later, because I'm interested in, yeah, I mean, examples and exactly, what was the situation? Were you drunk? Was he drunk?
no, I'm
Or
never drunk. No, no, these were all, they were mainly older men, some of them masquerading as spiritual gurus, like, I'm a tantric master, or
because the
I
thing is,
teach this.
what I'm interested in at this point is what's your experience where you say you're almost raped? What my question is when did you know where this was going, and why did you feel you couldn't say no and
Mm,
remove yourself from it?
yeah, it's a good one, because thanks for reminding me, because I wanted to share about my early childhood. I didn't have very good boundaries. I didn't have good physical or psychological boundaries, because in the extended family was a schizophrenic uncle, who was schizophrenic since he was 19.
Hmm.
And he had no sense of physical boundaries.
Oh
So since
gosh.
I was, very young,
Right, right.
even baby, toddler, growing up, he was always in my space. It's
Right.
just
So
like,
your
we all,
boundary was invaded. You were used to it being invaded from a very early age.
yeah,
That was
yeah,
just normal.
that was just normal.
Right.
I didn't have, um, yeah, that's something that I had to grow out of that through
Uh-huh.
painful experiences with men that who
Uh-huh.
kept invading my physical boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's not specific to society or mass media. That's just my unique experience.
Now,
You
may
know,
I just interrupt? I don't know. You've got 5 more minutes before this
Yes, sure.
recording will be cut off. I'll let you continue. We'll come back to this. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so that actually was a very harrowing and almost scary time in my life.
Hmm.
Because I didn't, yeah, it's not like when I watch, say, my daughters or, you know, other teenagers had a quite a normal, okay, have boyfriends and have a peer group. I didn't have any of that. And then suddenly I hit my late teens, early 20s, and it was then a series of much older men who had only one thing in mind, and I was targeted. And I didn't know how to push them away. I didn't know how to say no. So I had to learn all this so that by the time I reached almost 30, I was able to say, okay, I can tell that this guy is a he's good and he wants me to be his friend and we can actually have you know,
Mm. A
a good
human relationship,
a
not just a
human
bestial
relationship.
one.
Absolutely. And that relationship lasted 4 years. And then we remained friends for another 4 years, you know.
Mm.
Um,
That's
and I
very
did have
interesting.
another relationship much earlier on, but that was, I call it a fluke amongst all the other predators.
An accident. Whoops.
Yeah, how did this guy turn up? Who actually cared about me, like a soul brother, soul sister.
Okay.
That was a year. But that's how my history is. And I did the opposite, you see, because I felt targeted and I didn't know how to sort of send people off or whatever. I dressed down. I didn't put makeup on. I just didn't want to stand out. Didn't want men to notice me because it's like, why are they noticing me? I'm not even putting on lipstick. Yeah, see, these
Mm. So
covers the
you were
kind of
trying to
things.
hide, in a sense, from
Yeah,
this attention.
yeah, yeah. So that's sort of like the flip side of how I see when I observed how the teenage girls at the state comprehensive school, they look like 30-year-olds. They were hardly 13, right? And there's a lot of promiscuity even at that time, and everybody was pressured to have a boyfriend or girlfriend.
Mm.
I just thought this is perverse and tragic
Mm.
that we know we've entered the 21st century, and what does it say about the parents of these children? What are they learning at home, so that plus the pressure of social media,
Mm.
advertising, movies.
Mm.
Everybody wants to be a Kardashian or something or other,
Yeah.
and live this unreality. Yeah, so that's why what you discussed on the Facebook, I thought, yeah, this is very something I've thought a lot about. And yeah, I think it's important to speak about it more, to
I think this is
discuss all this.
fantastic. I'm so grateful to you, Felicity, for this opportunity for a woman and a man to speak about these things together, just as human beings. Do you know what I mean? This is my experience, that's your experience. And
Hmm.
so it's great. We're going to be able to do this without kind of like, you're a potential rape, you are a rapist because you're a man. Do you know what I mean? You just haven't done it yet. And I'm a woman and I'm just an innocent victim. We can just discuss this. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
because both those things are in there because this is the reality of the situation. Do you know what I mean?
yes,
If I
yes,
wanted and there was a woman or a child that I was in a vulnerable position, I would have the physical power that I could rape them if I wanted to. Do you know what I mean? That is the reality of the situation because the man is physically often
mm,
more dominant. But then
yeah,
the other side is what I'm talking is about, introduced from my experience, is a more psychological power that women hold, an emotional power that men are weaker in. And because it's psychological and emotional, it's more hidden. It has not been properly addressed yet. And I think it's time we started to do it in society to kind of balance the books. Now we're going to get cut off in just a few seconds. So this is the first part of the video where we've introduced ourselves. And the second video will be a more just a sort of free-form discussion between the two of us. Um, and I guess I'll see
yeah.
you in just a moment, Felicity.
Okay, great. Excellent.
Okay. So I'm gonna